Welcome back to the Curiosity and Co podcast, where we dive deep into the ideas that shape our everyday lives. I'm your host, and today we are exploring something so fundamental to human experience that you are probably doing it right now without even realizing it. We are talking about comparison. Now, picture this: you wake up this morning and immediately reach for your phone. You scroll through social media, and within seconds, you are comparing your messy hair to someone's perfectly curated morning selfie. Then you head to the kitchen and find out choosing between coffee and tea, weighing the benefits of caffeine versus the gentleness of herbal tea. On your way to work, you notice your neighbor's pristine lawn and glance at your own slightly overgrown grass. Before 9 a.m., you have already made dozens of comparisons, each one shaping your thoughts, decisions, and even your mood. Now, this isn't unusual, it's utterly human. From the moment we are born until we draw our last breath, we are comparison machines. But have you ever stopped to wonder why? What is it about the human mind that makes us constantly measure, contrast, and evaluate everything against everything else? Today, we are going to unpack the idea of comparison in all its complexity. We will explore how your brain actually processes comparisons, why evolution gave us this mental power, and perhaps most importantly, how comparison can be both a tool for the understanding of the world and a trap that steals our joy. So grab your favorite beverage, whether it's better than coffee or tea is entirely up to you. And let's dive in. Let us start with the basics. What exactly is comparison? And how does your brain pull off this remarkable feat? At its core, comparison is the mental process of examining two or more things to identify their similarities and differences. Sounds simple, right? But what is happening in your head when you compare is actually extraordinarily complex. Think about the time you walked into a grocery store and stood in front of the apple display. Your eyes scan the options: red apples, green ones, some that are perfectly round, others slightly lopsided. In milliseconds, your brain is processing color, shape, size, even imagining taste and texture based on the visual cues. You are categorizing, evaluating, and deciding all through the power of comparison. Neuroscientists have found that decision making and comparative thinking involve multiple brain networks working together. The prefrontal cortex, often called as the CEO of the brain, coordinates with regions like the anterior cingulate cortex and posterior parietal cortex as a part of what's known as the frontoparietal network. These areas are involved in executive functions like working memory, attention, and decision making. Processes that are certainly involved when we compare and evaluate options. But you know what is fascinating? Your brain doesn't just compare things that are right in front of you. It is constantly comparing the present to the past, reality to expectations, yourself to others, even actual experiences to imagined possibilities. Right now, as you listen to this podcast, part of your brain might be comparing my voice to other podcast hosts you've heard, or comparing what you are learning to things you already know. Take a moment here and notice your own mind at work. What comparisons are you making right now? Maybe you're comparing this topic to others we have covered, or thinking about whether this is more or less interesting than you expected. Just notice, don't judge. Just observe your comparison machine in action. Now, not all comparisons are created equal. Researchers identify several distinct types. There is quantitative comparison: bigger versus smaller, more versus less. This is the kind that helps you choose the better deal at the store or decide if you have enough time to finish a task. Then there's qualitative comparison. which is more subtle and subjective. When you describe a song as a more haunting than uplifting, or a conversation as more superficial than meaningful, you are making qualitative comparisons. These are the comparisons that help us navigate the nuanced world of human experience. Perhaps most intriguingly, we also make abstract comparisons. We compare concepts like justice and mercy, or democracy and authoritarianism. These abstract comparisons are what allow us to think philosophically, to develop moral frameworks, and to imagine better ways of organizing society. So, why did we evolve to be such comparison obsessed creatures? The answer lies in survival. Imagine you are one of our ancient ancestors walking through a landscape you have never seen before. You come across two plants. One looks similar to berries you know are safe to eat, the other looks different. Your ability to compare, to spot patterns and differences, literally means the difference between nourishment and poison, between life and death. This is pattern recognition at its most basic level, and it is powered by comparison. Our ancestors, who were better at comparing, were more likely to survive. They could distinguish between safe and dangerous animals, identify which tools were more effective, recognize changes in weather patterns, and choose the most defensible places to set up a camp. But the evolutionary advantages go far deeper than physical survival. Comparison is the foundation of learning itself. When a child learns what hot means, they are not just memorizing a word, they are understanding it in a relation to cold and warm. Every concept we acquire is built on a scaffold of comparisons. Consider how you learned to drive a car. You compared the pressure needed for the brake versus the gas pedal, compared the feeling of turning left versus right, compared good parking jobs to poor ones. Without comparison, learning would be nearly impossible. And then there's decision making. Every choice you make, from life altering career decisions to what to have for lunch, involves comparing options. You weigh pros and cons, consider trade offs, and evaluate potential outcomes. Our ancestors, who were skilled at these comparative evaluations, were more likely to make choices that enhanced their survival and reproduction. Let me share a fascinating example from the animal kingdom. Researchers studying mate selection in various species have found that comparison is crucial even for our non human cousins. Female songbirds, for instance, don't just choose any male, they compare the complexity of different male songs, the quality of their territories, and even their physical attributes. In one study, scientists have played recordings of different male songs to female zebra finches. The females consistently preferred males whose songs were more complex and varied. But here's the key: they only showed this preference when they could compare multiple songs. When presented with just one song, they could not evaluate its quality. The comparison was essential for making the choice. This suggests that comparison isn't just a quirky human habit. It is a fundamental mechanism for navigating the world that we share with many other species. Now, let's turn to perhaps the most emotionally charged arena of human comparison: how we compare ourselves to others. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger introduced social comparison theory, and it revolutionized our understanding of human behavior. Festinger argued that we have an innate drive to evaluate ourselves, and in the absence of objective measures, we compare ourselves to other people. Think about it. How do you know if you are funny? You compare the reactions you get to the reactions others get. How do you know if you are a good parent? You observe other parents and measure your own performance against theirs. How do you know if you are successful? You look at the achievements of your peers, your siblings, your colleagues. This drive to compare is so strong that we do it automatically, often without conscious awareness. Social media has supercharged this process, giving us endless opportunities to measure our lives against carefully curated versions of other people's lives. But here is where it gets complicated. Social comparison can be a powerful motivator. When you see someone who's achieved something you want, it can inspire you to work harder, to believe that success is possible. Psychologists call this upward comparison. And when it leads to inspiration rather than desperation, it can be incredibly beneficial. I am reminded of the story of Roger Bannister, the first person to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Before 1954, many believed it was physically impossible for humans to break the 4-minute barrier. But once Bannister did it, suddenly dozens of other runners achieved the same feat within the next few years. They had a new point of comparison that expanded their sense of what was possible. But upward comparison has a dark side. When we compare ourselves to those who seem to have more, be more, or do more, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy, envy, and depression. Social media makes this particularly insidious because we are comparing our internal reality, our struggles, insecurities, and mundane moments to others' external highlights reels. Then there's downward comparison, comparing ourselves to those who are worse off. This can boost our self esteem temporarily, but it often comes with a side helping of guilt or Schadenfreude that doesn't feel particularly healthy in the long run. Here's something to consider. When you catch yourself in comparison spiral, ask yourself what you are actually comparing. Are you comparing your real life to someone's public persona? Your worst moments to their best? Your beginning to their middle? Often, the comparisons that cause us the most pain are fundamentally unfair or based on incomplete information. Let us shift gears and explore some deeper philosophical territory. Could it be that comparison isn't just how we understand the world, but actually creates meaning itself? Consider this thought experiment. Imagine a universe where everything was exactly the same color, same shape, same size, same temperature. Would the concept of beautiful have any meaning? Could good exist without bad? Would we understand fast without slow? Many philosophers argue that meaning emerges from contrast, from comparison. The ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang captures this beautifully. Opposing forces that define each other. Light has meaning because of darkness, joy because of sorrow, love because of loneliness. This isn't just philosophical speculation. In linguistics, we find that many concepts are inherently comparative. We understand tall only in relation to short, hot only in contrast to cold. Even more complex ideas like justice gain their power from comparison. We recognize justice partly by contrasting it with injustice. Let me give you a concrete example from the world of art. In music, harmony doesn't exist without dissonance. The most beautiful pieces often derive their emotional power from the tension and the resolution between contrasting elements. A perpetually harmonious piece would become monotonous, while one that was constantly dissonant would be unbearable. Jazz musicians understand this intuitively. They use comparison and contrast as creative tools, playing with listeners' expectations by introducing unexpected harmonies that gain their impact precisely from how they differ from what came before. The same principle applies in visual art. A painter doesn't just put colors on canvas, they juxtapose colors, creating relationships and tensions that generate visual interest and emotional response. The red becomes more vibrant next to the green, light areas more luminous against the dark. This suggests something profound about human experience. Maybe our drive to compare isn't an error, it's part of how we are built. It is how we extract meaning, create beauty, and make sense of existence. But, and this is a crucial but, recognizing the importance of comparison doesn't mean we should be slaves to it, especially when it comes to our own self worth and happiness. One of the most fascinating aspects of comparison is how it shapes entire fields of human knowledge. Think about it. Comparative literature doesn't just study individual works, but examines how different texts illuminate each other through the contrast and similarity. Comparative anthropology reveals universal human patterns by studying diverse cultures. Comparative psychology shows us what makes human cognition unique by contrasting it with other species. Even disciplines that don't explicitly call themselves comparative rely heavily on comparison. Medical diagnosis works by comparing symptoms to known patterns. Legal reasoning operates by comparing current cases to precedent. Scientific research advances by comparing experimental results to control groups. But here's what's really intriguing. Different cultures approach comparison in remarkably different ways, and these differences have profound implications for how people experience life. Western cultures, particularly in North America and Northern Europe, tend to encourage what researchers call independent self construal. People are taught to see themselves as separate, autonomous individuals, and comparison often focuses on personal achievement, individual traits, and standing out from the crowd. In contrast, many East Asian, Latin American, and African cultures emphasize interdependent self control. Here, comparison is more about fitting in, contributing to group harmony, and understanding your role in relation to others. The focus shifts from how am I better to how do I belong. These cultural differences in comparison styles have real world consequences. Research shows that people from more individualistic cultures are more prone to the negative effects of social comparison, particularly upward comparison. When your culture tells you that your individual achievements define your worth, seeing others outperform you hits harder. Meanwhile, people from more collectivistic cultures often show greater resilience to comparison based distress, but they may struggle more with guilt when they outperform their peers because standing out can conflict with cultural values of group harmony. This raises fascinating questions about whether our comparison heavy modern world, with its global social media and constant exposure to diverse lifestyles and achievements, is fundamentally at odds with our psychological well being. Are we comparing ourselves across cultural and economical contexts that our minds weren't evolved to handle? So, we have established that comparison is both fundamental to human experience and potentially problematic for our well being. The question becomes, how do we harness the power of comparison while avoiding its pitfalls? Let's start with some practical strategies that research has shown to be effective. First, Become aware of your comparison patterns. For one day, try to notice every time you make a comparison that affects your mood. Whether it's scrolling social media, walking through a neighborhood fancier than yours, or even watching a movie with actors who seem to have perfect lives. Just notice. Awareness is the first step towards choice. Second, practice what psychologists call lateral comparison instead of just upward or downward comparison. Instead of asking, who's better than me? Or who's worse than me? You can ask, who is different from me? And what can I learn from that difference? This shifts comparison from a zero sum game to a learning opportunity. Here's a practical technique I find particularly powerful: the historical self comparison. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare your current self to your past self. Are you kinder than you were 5 years ago? More skilled? More patient? Have you overcome challenges that once seemed impossible? This type of comparison has several advantages. First, you're working with complete information. You actually know both versions of yourself intimately. Second, it focuses on growth rather than competition. And third, it reminds you that you're not a fixed entity, but a work in progress. Let me share a story that illustrates this beautifully. A friend of mine was struggling with career anxiety. He kept comparing himself to a colleague who seemed to effortlessly excel at everything. He would look at his colleagues' smooth presentations and polished reports and feel completely inadequate. Then he tried the historical self comparison. He looked back at his first year in the job and realized something remarkable. The presentations that he now delivered without thinking twice would have terrified him 3 years ago. The projects he now completed competently would have overwhelmed his past self. By comparing his present self to his past self, he could see genuine growth and competence that the lateral comparison to his colleague had obscured. But perhaps the most important shift is learning to compare processes rather than outcomes. Instead of comparing your results to someone else's results, compare your effort to your effort, your learning to your learning, your persistence to your persistence. This is particularly crucial in our social media age, where we are constantly exposed to other people's highlight reels. Remember that you are seeing the end result of their process, not the process itself. The seemingly effortless success you are admiring probably involved years of work, failure, and growth that you are not seeing. There is also something to be said for embracing what philosophers call radical acceptance. The idea that some comparisons are simply irrelevant to your happiness and well being. So, what if your neighbor has a nicer car? Or what if your colleague got a promotion faster? So, what if your friend seems to have a more exciting social life? This does not mean becoming complacent or losing ambition. It means recognizing that your worth and happiness do not depend on how you stack up against others in every measurable category. Now, here's something that might seem contradictory at first. One of the most effective antidotes to the negative effects of comparison is actually more comparison, but a very specific kind. Gratitude research has shown that people who regularly practice gratitude are happier, less anxious, and more satisfied with their lives. And at its core, gratitude is a comparison practice. When you feel gratitude for your health, you are implicitly comparing having health to not having it. When you appreciate a friend's kindness, you are contrasting it with indifference or cruelty. But there's a crucial difference between gratitude based comparison and envy based comparison. Gratitude compares your current reality to worst possible realities, while envy compares your current reality to better possible realities. Both involve comparison, but they lead to completely different emotional and psychological outcomes. Try this exercise. Think of three things you are grateful for right now. Notice how each act of gratitude involves a comparison. Maybe you are grateful for your morning coffee. That is comparing the pleasure of having it to the alternative of not having it. Maybe you are grateful for a friend's support. That's comparing their kindness to indifference or rejection. This type of comparison doesn't diminish you or make you feel inadequate. Instead, it highlights abundance, connection, and positive aspects of your life that you might otherwise take for granted. There's also something powerful about what we might call temporal gratitude. Comparing your current life not just to worse possibilities, but to your own past struggles. If you have overcome addiction, financial hardship, relationship difficulties, or health challenges, comparing your present to those difficult periods can generate profound appreciation for where you are now. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending that current problems don't matter. It is about maintaining perspective and recognizing progress, even in the midst of ongoing challenges. As we start to wrap up our exploration, let us zoom out and consider the bigger picture. What role should comparison play in life well lived? I think the answer lies in recognizing comparison as both inevitable and potentially valuable, while developing the wisdom to engage with it skillfully. We can't stop our brains from making comparisons. It's too fundamental to how we process information and make decisions. But we can become more conscious about which comparisons we entertain, how we interpret them, and what actions we take based on them. The most fulfilled people I know aren't those who have stopped comparing altogether. That would be neither possible nor desirable. Rather, they are people who have learned to compare in ways that serve their growth, learning, and well being. They compare their current selves to their past selves to appreciate progress. They compare different approaches to problems to find better solutions. They compare their struggles to other struggles to feel less alone and to cultivate compassion. They compare their blessings to possible alternatives to cultivate gratitude. But they have also learned to resist comparisons that serve no constructive purpose. The comparison that only generate envy, inadequacy, or self-judgment without leading to positive action or insight. There's a beautiful paradox here. The people who seem most free from the tyranny of comparison are often those who have learned to compare most wisely. They have developed what we might call comparison intelligence, the ability to recognize when comparison serves them and when it doesn't, and to choose accordingly. This is perhaps one of the most important life skills we can develop. And it's one that our comparison saturated culture rarely teaches explicitly. We are surrounded by opportunities to compare, but we are rarely given frameworks for doing it in psychologically healthy ways. As we conclude today's exploration of comparison, I want to leave you with some questions to carry forward into your own life. These aren't questions with right or wrong answers, but rather invitations for reflection and self discovery. First, what comparisons do you make most frequently? And how do they affect your mood and self perception? Are there patterns you notice? Certain triggers that send you into comparison spirals? Or certain types of comparisons that consistently make you feel worse about yourself? Second, how might your life change if you spent less mental energy comparing yourself to others and more energy comparing your present self to your past self? What growth would become visible? What progress would you celebrate? Third, in what areas of your life could comparison actually serve you better? Are there domains where you are not comparing enough? Where examining alternatives, seeking feedback, or studying others' approaches could help you improve or make better decisions? And finally, how might you transform comparison from a source of suffering into a tool for learning and growth? What would it look like to approach comparison with curiosity rather than judgment, with compassion rather than criticism? Remember, the goal is not to eliminate comparison from your life. That's neither possible nor desirable. Comparison is how we learn, how we make decisions, and how we make meaning. The goal is to become more conscious and intentional about how you compare so that this fundamental human capacity serves your flourishing rather than undermining it. Maybe the next time you catch yourself in a comparison, instead of judging yourself for comparing, you can simply notice it and ask, is this comparison serving me? What can I learn from it? And how can I use it to become more of who I want to be? That is all for today's episode of the Curiosity and Co podcast. I'm grateful you chose to spend this time exploring the ideas with me. And yes, that gratitude is itself a comparison between having this connection with you and not having it. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and remember, you are exactly where you need to be in your own unique journey. No comparison necessary. You have been listening to Curiosity and Co podcast, a space where we slow down to explore the questions that shape our inner lives and collective realities. It's a place for thinkers, readers, and wanderers of the mind, those who find wonder in the ideas and meaning in complexity. Here, we reflect on philosophy, science, psychology, and the way we live and relate to the world, drawing from both the timeless wisdom and modern insights. Tune in for the ideas, stay for the insight. Because at Curiosity and Co, curiosity isn't just a trait, it's a worldview.